What's happening, guys? Welcome back for more talk on Cosmic Ghost Rider and his plans to raise baby Thanos into a better man. Well, he's more like a toddler. He's like 3 years old at this point. But Frank Castle believes that he could raise him to eventually be a better man. So we're going to talk about that for a minute, and also why him going back in time doesn't undo everything that happened where he met Thanos in the first place. Because I've had quite a few of you guys make mention of, okay, with him going back in time, if he raises Thanos to be better, then the older Thanos will never send him back to get the mid-age Thanos to go to the future with the older Thanos, so on and so forth. And for anybody who got lost in that, just hit the playlist down in the description. It'll catch you all up to here. And even hearing myself saying it out loud, it sounds like a lot, but going through the issues, it doesn't really feel like a lot. It happens at a good pace. And the time travel, when we see it used, it feels well thought out and not like a last minute thought where the narrative is kind of tripping over itself. And that really separates your good time travel stories from the not so good. And so the first thing I want to clear up is something we talked about a while back on this channel on the James Hudson Jr. playlist, where we talked about alternate realities with him originating from one, and that being the 1610 universe. And I also used James Hudson to break down the incursion, which causes universes to collide as a product of too much time travel wearing out space and time. And at that time, Age of Ultron was like your straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But with time runs out happening in the main continuity, and the 1610 universe having their own side of events taking place in this same incursion, this showed us early on how it can affect multiple realities. But I'd also have to say that Kang from the 1610 universe would have to be one of the best examples, because it's very direct. Because Kang the Conqueror in any universe is really just this time traveler that goes back in time to create a future that complements his or her own benefits. And in the 1610 universe, where Sue Storm eventually became Kang, we saw that time travel as a result created an alternate reality, with her past being the 1610 universe and her present time, which is the future of the 1610, was like 13074. And with Frank Castle traveling back in time with the intention to take out like this 3-year-old Thanos, even though he had a change of heart when he got there, by changing the events of the natural course of time, by just going back to this moment, he's already created an alternate reality. And this is really just another one of those examples that one small decision can create a butterfly effect that can ripple throughout the entire Marvel universe. But even with him doing this, the universe that he came from, it still existed and ended, having its own pocket in time that exists up until the point where Thanos pretty much left and changed everything that remained by changing himself. And as far as Cosmic Ghost Rider, from this reality, he has lived and died here. And when Thanos erases himself from this reality, the only thing that we see remaining is death, meaning those who have died before he took the time stone, they have passed into the different realms of the afterlife, and any one of them can possibly return at any point in time. And we'll talk about that later on once we get more into the Infinity event and more of Thanos wins, because where this Thanos arrives at is going to be the kicker at the end of the day. So just keep in mind, time traveling creates new alternate realities that can also pose as a threat to established realities, and at any given point along this new timeline, these characters could also cross over into your main continuity, because like I've mentioned, all of that has happened before. But with Cosmic Ghost Rider going back and taking the 3-year-old Thanos, making the better decision, as so it seems. First thing he does is take him to a bar on Marcus Centauri, which is a planet that a friend of Frank's told him about in a story, and which is why he really came to this planet to find that friend and get some help. But while he's here, he's really trying to recall that whole story and figure out where this friend would be at this time, which is a very significant part of that story, but they really don't get to stay there too long because the bar has like a no kid policy, who would think? And that leads to the manager trying to kick them out. But while they were here, and Frank is explaining to younger Thanos why he took him from his home and why they're on this planet looking for his old friend, and so he won't grow up to be this mass murderer. Like, the only things that are clicking for the young Thanos is like murderer. Yeah, tell me more about that murder part. But that's not even the part of the conversation that stirred up the people in the bar as much, because Frank kept saying that these people are going to die, more specifically in about 10 minutes. And when it began, it broke up the standoff, and then it really clicked. because Galactus came to this planet Marcus Centauri to devour it. And he was that old friend that Frank was talking about, because many years later of what's supposed to be the future of this universe, when Galactus came to Earth finding Frank, who was already Ghost Rider at that point, quite some time had passed with these two before they had eventually taken on Thanos in that timeline. So it's easy to imagine over all those years that at some point Galactus told Frank a number of stories of where Galactus has been, what planets he's visited, and for Frank that really came in handy because it gave him a place to go at this past point in time, which he probably had in mind when he chose what age to go back to Thanos, even with his prior intention of taking him out. Because remember, after Frank died as Cosmic Ghost Rider, when he was in Valhalla, he had a lot of time to think, and much of those thoughts were about Thanos and all that he's done throughout so many years, and a lot of that he learned from working with Thanos for so long. Much like his time with Galactus, who he referred to as his old friend, who shared with him many stories. And even though when you put that in the mind of your Cosmic Ghost Rider, who's a little crazy because all of that power being put on a human mind, but nonetheless you have this catalog of information, times, and dates that stretch throughout countless millennia to go off of. And of course, the longer he stays, the more will change, so that information is only good for so long. But I could definitely see it working as a baseline for him to recognize and point out familiarities where things have changed. Speaking of which, when he's talking to Galactus with Baby Thanos, like Baby Thanos just yells out fishies, which throws off Frank because you think you're gonna look up and see cute little fishes, but no. They're star sharks, which is crazy because when you see these guys, it usually means one of a few things. But even crazier, like these guys have been popping up in Marvel Legacy like no one's business. Most recently, I want to say we've seen them in God of Thunder Reborn, and also before that in the God of Thunder series, and they date back much further than that, because at first they were just a species that the Brood would control, but later in Jason Aaron's God of Thunder, we saw that when they run wild, they're usually running away from the god Tempest, also known as the Mother of Thunder, which Odin battled and actually trapped within Thor's hammer. And that's the origin we recently got in the Mighty Thor with Jane Foster, where we found out how and why the hammer has always been sentient. But in the future, after Mjolnir is destroyed, we see them pop up again, and before old King Thor just kills it, like his granddaughters come up with a way to find some type of food to sustain it, because even before all this, when Gore the God Butcher was slaughtering gods, these star sharks would also feed on their bodies. But in the distant future, Thor's granddaughters came up with a solution that was like gluten and wheat and kind of satiated his hunger. It's kind of crazy. But back to Cosmic Ghost Rider, when Galactus saw the Star Sharks, he pretty much just wiped them all out. And I wouldn't even say every last one in that universe, but just the ones that came to attack him. But after Galactus clears them out, he looks into Cosmic Ghost Rider's mind, who possesses the power cosmic that he gave him, and he catches him up with all the events that took place in this alternate timeline, showing him on one side the years that he served with Galactus, and on the other side, Galactus' death in the years that he served with Thanos. And even beyond his death and his intentions for initially killing Thanos, but then changing his decision and deciding to raise him. And that's why he brings him to Galactus, because he's like, look man, I'm gonna need your help because this is uncharted territory. But the crazy thing is, after telling him everything that has happened up until this point and telling him that he wants to raise him the right way, Galactus don't really hear that. He just hears like pretty much, oh, this is the guy that killed me? Oh, so you brought him here for us to kill him first. Like none of that got through. But what I like is that Cosmic Ghost Rider, with him being the Punisher at its core, but then you add on top of that the Spirit of Vengeance, and then on top of that the Herald with the power cosmic. At his core, Frank Castle cannot escape his primary principles. And we talked about earlier on the playlist that the Punisher just does not kill kids. And when he died and was separated from the Spirit of Vengeance and separated from the power cosmic, we saw at his soul, his core, he is Frank Castle, like his soul, literally. And even through him enduring, coming back and living for so long, and being bestowed with the Spirit of Vengeance and the power cosmic, which are literally trying to melt his mind and drive him insane. Even still, Frank Castle is under there and he is steering, and he ultimately is making his own decisions. So when Galactus is like, just hand them over, I'll do it, Thanos points to the sky baby, which is Uatu the Watcher. And I'm telling you, baby Thanos is just learning all kind of new stuff here. Like any 3-year-old, he just absorbs information like a sponge. But with Uatu showing up here, initially Frank thinks that, okay, Uatu only shows up at critical events. So for that reason, he has to be on Frank's side. And for that reason, this has to be something big like the Infinity Event, the Phoenix Force, or Chitauri Armada. Like those are the type of things that he usually shows up for. Because Uatu has also seen every reality. He watches them simultaneously. But he comes here to tell Frank, you have made the dumbest decision in all of existence. Oh man, like coming from anybody else, you kind of be like, okay dude, like whatever. But coming from Uatu, who one, doesn't really tell jokes like that, but two, has actually seen all of existence. And he tells him, I've come to witness the worst choice that any living being has ever made in the history of thought. That's deep. And I can just imagine Deadpool hearing this and being like, whoa, like, no, I hold the title for the most dumbest thinking in his thoughts that have ever been thunk. And then going even further to prove it by teaching baby Thanos where sky babies come from. That would be just terrible. But could you imagine like Deadpool and Cosmic Ghost Rider raising Thanos? Like imagine what type of person he would then grow up to be. But seriously, Uatu, his main point when he appears here is getting the point across to Frank that Thanos is meant to be the evil Thanos that we have known him to be. Like that is a constant of the universe. And by changing that and just taking into account all the lives that he's taken, like the mass genocide among those lives, like could you imagine amongst those lives how many would have caused imbalance, how many would have later become beings of great power and done even crazier things. And as terrible as it sounds, it's like the universe needs him to be this way. It needs him to be who he is. And if Frank changes that, the cascading effect is going to be unimaginably worse, hence being the dumbest decision ever. And it's a lot like what we talked about back in the Wolverine series with Daken going up against Mr. Sinister, and Mr. Sinister taking the body of Wolverine, which was trapped in adamantium, and us seeing that come back in the hunt for Wolverine, and also in the build up for the War of Realms, where old King Thor far into the future sees Wolverine with the Phoenix Force at the end of time, showing us the aftermath kind of at the same time that the story unfolds. But very much like the Wolverine series, like I mentioned, Destiny told Mystique that the world needs a Wolverine. And at this time there were many others, Lord Kenny, Honey Badger, Daken, James, Albert running around somewhere. But when this happened, it brought in this idea of more or less the universe needing Logan. And with the Watcher showing up and saying that this is a demand of a higher power, we find out that Thanos is very much that same way. But interrupting this conversation, like there's a lot of interruptions, but interrupting this conversation with Uatu, he's met by Cable, who is leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's like Howard the Duck is Juggernaut, Rocket Raccoon maybe a Star Brand. You also have what looks like to be Jubilee and Miss Marvel. Like everything is so different, and it's all because of the changes made by Cosmic Ghost Rider. And for all we know, Peter Quill may have never have left Earth, and somehow, some way, Groot might not even exist. And because of the future that they're from, that is based off of this one, based off of this alternate past, there's no telling, at least not at this point, where he could be or who else has all been affected or changed. All because Cosmic Ghost Rider tried to change this one child's life in order to save the universe. But I gotta say, aside from wanting to see the origin of Cable and how he became Star-Lord, and wanted to see whether the Shi'ar Empire came and abducted him, if they sent Gladiator to come get him or something like that, I would also like to know, where's Gamora? It wasn't until I said that out loud where it kind of just happened. But I'd like to know, like, how did her life turn out without Thanos? Because much of the Gamora we know was heavily impacted by Thanos. And I'm just curious to see what she would do differently had they not, or had he not taken her. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Like, what other changes do you think we'll see in this timeline? Will it cross over with the Prime Earth? Or in some crazy way has it created the Prime Earth? But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.